friends, it is Stephanie Kirk here with you tonight, looking at another fileable stream. All right, so our learning intention is through the use of blank, I will be able to write body paragraphs that include a link to the thesis statement, embedded text evidence, and a thorough explanation of how the evidence supports the claim, okay? How the evidence supports the claim. Now, here's the thing I want to highlight to you here. There's a blank in this. I'm going to give you a couple of strategies, and you're going to fill in the blank with the one that you think is going to work for you. What is in our stream? First of all, we're going to review the FRQ2 expectations. I think it's important for us to know exactly what's expected, and then we're going to look back over creating a plan. Now, we went over creating a plan, the IDA and the TOBY with the RA introductions, but those are so important that I have to go over them again, even if it's just in passing, to make sure that you're with me, because that's going to be the piece that helps you build with your body paragraph frame. So we're going to look at what that, when I say body paragraph, we're going to look at the rubric, make sure we understand what's going on with the rubric, and then we're going to talk about that first body paragraph and then additional body paragraphs, because we're looking at quality over quantity. And with our expectations, if we have two solid, like I nailed it body paragraphs, we don't need a whole lot of extras. But we're going to look at some of those. So you'll kind of see those as we look through. And then we're going to look at the feedback on those paragraphs. And so your goal is to look at these paragraphs and think about the things that you see in your paragraphs and how you can, or in the sample paragraphs, and take that information so you can own it for your paragraphs. Does that sound good? A lot going on in a single night, right? So tonight's text, we're going to look at the 2018 Albright commencement. And if you pulled it up on Fiveable, I had a link for you so that you could have that text there. But if you didn't, I'm sure we can work that out here in the next couple of seconds. And we're going to look just really quickly at what is rhetorical analysis. So at this point, you've probably started talking about this. Even if you aren't writing it, you're definitely reading it and analyzing text as you go through. So basically, according to our course and exam description, it is the process of breaking down complex text and the parts of a text to analyze the function and the way in which they kind of work together to impact the meaning, the purpose, and the audience movement. It is driven by the rhetorical situation. And so that's going to be that whole big circle with your context and your purpose. And your exigence or your occasion, then your triangle, which is going to be your subject, your audience, and your speaker. And then deep, deep, deep down inside, at the heart of every argument, are going to be those appeals, the ethos, logos, and pathos. Remember, we're not writing full paragraphs about those things, okay? So the next is going to be that idea of DIDDLES. Anybody familiar with DIDDLES? We talked about it, but we'll give it to you here in just a minute, so you'll have that as well. And then it's about analyzing the choices that build toward effective communication. So if you are following with us in the Nearpod, one thing that I want to kind of point out to you is if you hover over that little arrow down right here, it's going to open up and you can actually click notes. And then when you click notes, it's going to let you save it. So this is going to give you all of the slides from tonight. Now, obviously, I'm going to send you a follow-up email. You'll have all of these links. It'll be great. Give you feedback. Make sure I answer any questions you guys have for me. But I just wanted to give you a heads up so you would know and you could pull in those notes as you needed. Okay? So that kind of gives you a better idea there for what that looks like. All right. So the next thing is I just kind of wanted to give you an idea of what rhetorical analysis looks like. So this is a very, very thorough process. And this particular student has so many different techniques on here for rhetorical analysis. I love all of it. I go back and forth from day to day which one is my favorite technique, but you can see this person has analyzed dominant strategies and support strategies over here on the side. Down at the bottom, you can see this start and end. So you kind of know exactly where we're building to. How does the audience start? How does the audience end? And then in the middle, it's the movement that happens in there. And so that's a neat way of looking at it. You can kind of see up on the top, there's a preliminary thesis statement. So you're kind of looking and able to see what that is. And then of course, your 1, 2s, and 3s on your elements up at the top for kind of a writing plan. So I'm sure your analysis looks just like that, right? Okay. So what are the expectations? Like if you're like me and like a lot of my students, in your brain, you're just like, tell me what to do so I can do it. And I'm with you, and I love that, okay? So In our course exam description, it says that you're going to be given a passage of approximately 600 to 800 words, and you're going to analyze the rhetorical choices. And it assesses your ability to respond to the prompt with a thesis that analyzes the writer's rhetorical choices, select and use evidence to support your line of reasoning, explain how the evidence supports your line of reasoning, demonstrate an understanding of the rhetorical situation, and then use appropriate grammar and punctuation in communicating your argument. Now, the thing I want to point out here is as we move to the body paragraphs, what do you think is the most important part of these expectations? Like what stands out to you as, I need to make sure I do this? 100%, it's that whole line of reasoning thing, right? It absolutely is. Because you've got to make sure that you are clear in that thought process that gets you from this is what my person is saying, this is what my person wants of us, this is how they approach that. So we're looking at the what are we doing, why are they doing it, and how does it impact the audience? How does it create that movement based on the purpose? So now we know the expectations. So the first big step you have to do before you can even get to your body paragraphs is, of course, reading and annotating the prompt. And that includes the prompt itself, like, what do you want me to do? And then it includes the text stimulus, okay? So there's two pieces here included in reading and annotating the prompt. So what does that look like? I'm glad you asked. This is our prompt for tonight. It is the 2018 Albright commencement speech. I picked this one intentionally. For a couple of reasons. The first reason is because this is one of the, we have, I'm not gonna, well, you'll figure it out if you Google around for a minute, but this is one of the first writing samples that College Board gave to teachers to say, hey, here's what the new rubric is, and here are some samples of it. But you also have access to the scores under the old rubric. So I know there are some teachers who are sticking with the old rubric for right now, and if that's what your teacher's doing, that's great, but I want to make sure you understand what the expectations are on the new rubric. So what does it look like? Well, if you haven't watched our replays, I think it would help you to go back and look at them. In the introduction, we go into a little bit more detail here, but some of our other slides talk about this, some of our other streams talk about this as well. So number one, BAT the prompt. BAT means background, advice, and task. So here you can see this student has really gone through and really looked at it and analyzed what am I being asked. Now, the great thing about batting the prompt is you'll note down at the bottom, number one, what is her message? And number two, how does she convey it? Now, just in case you haven't seen this prompt in class, I wanted to make sure you had the opportunity to kind of look at it. So you do have that link on the Fiveable worksheet that I gave you. It'll help you out as you go through here. And it gives you all of it. And this is actually a pretty long rhetorical analysis prompt. I think it's one of the longer ones that we've seen. So the next piece is the stimulus text. So here is another example. It's actually the same one, but I wanted you to be able to see the body of it being annotated. Note that on the sides, there are some comments, a little bit of highlighting throughout. I do think it's worthy to point out to you that you can't use a highlighter on the exam itself. You're allowed to have a blue pen, a black pen, and a pencil. So even in my class, as we move forward, I'm gonna steer them away from highlighters. We're gonna start using our blue pen, our black pen, and our pencil. And that's gonna be how we differentiate on the text so that when we roll up on that test, we're not stressed out and worried about the fact that we can't color code, because you'll get used to it. So, all right, here's the bottom, so you can kind of see what the rest of that looked like. And one thing I want to point out to you, and I want you to make sure that you see, and I want you to make sure that you do this in your analysis as well. As this person read and annotated, you can see the structures and the strategies that are there. Note the use of the 1, 2, 3, 4 right there on the text. That is going to become the outline for the actual essay itself. So if you actually spend that time, that 8 to 12 minutes, reading and annotating the prompt, annotate it thoroughly, practice it on a regular basis so that when you roll up on that test, you're prepared and you're going to be able to quickly outline your speech or your response so that you can build it on the fly, okay? Now, we also talked about the strategies for the IDA, which came from Brandon, and the strategy for TOBY, which we're going to look at in just a moment, which came from Catherine. So if you've been following their streams and following their plays, this is not new information to you, but I wanted to include it just in case. So if you decide to use the IDA strategy, then what you're going to do is you're just going to go through, read it, identify what's there. Okay, you're just looking at what is it? What are the strategies? And then you're going to look at deciding the why. Categorize it how you see fit. This is important because generally your teachers are going to say, talk about strategies in the beginning, talk about strategies in the middle, and then talk about strategies in the end, or something similar to that. Because generally, when you're writing about literature, you do talk about it in chronological order, in the order that it happens. So it's important that you categorize it how you choose. You may choose to do it by intended purpose. That's okay. You may do it by the shift that occurs. You may do it by just that chronological, here's what happened first, here's what happened second, here's what happened next. So you have a choice to how you want to do that. And then the A is to analyze it. Make sure you explain how it impacts the audience. If you don't include that how piece, then you're not really analyzing the text. We're not interested in a summary, and that's perhaps the number one error I see in rhetorical analysis. We hit that summary, but we don't make that jump into analysis. So the next one was the TOBY outline. If you choose to use the TOBY outline during your analysis, then what you're going to do is you're going to create your thesis statement. Now, sometimes I tell my students it's totally okay to make a fill-in-the-blank thesis statement, because if you have a fill-in-the-blank thesis statement, it's going to help you out in the long run, because as you go through, you can draw an opinion and make your conclusions and have your evidence that way. But that's a little bit more for the synthesis. So we'll talk about that when it's time to get there. Next, you want to come up with a complete outline, okay? And I don't mean complete in terms of like full sentence outline, but I mean like those bullet notes or the 1, 2, 3, 4 that you saw on that sample document. And then that big idea. Your big idea is going to build toward that concluding element of your writing, but it's the lasting impact of the text overall. And it's the thing that makes it really matter. Like, why are we even still studying this text? Okay, so that kind of gets us caught up a little bit on where we were if you didn't follow in those others. So here's just kind of at the end. This is the TOBY process for the same prompt, the Albright prompt. You can see seizing a celebratory moment of all female grads. You can just see the shorthand like A, Albright, that's the person's name. Also, make sure you're putting the person's name down there correctly. It's a legendary thing the year that we had the Gandhi prompt that people didn't use the H, and like there were poems written about the wandering letter H, just to think about that. So make sure you spell it right. But then look down here toward the bottom, you've got the 1, 2, 3. So you can already see these are the things they're going to talk about. If we go back and we look at what they wrote the one by on the paper, in hindsight, I should have put that here too. But if we go back and we look at that 1, 2, 3, then you're going to see overview with the diction, big picture to the smaller parts, linking the point of view, examples and anecdotes, the call to action with the courage and the ability to persevere. So all of those pieces were already there. And once you have those pieces there, all you have to do is put it in order, right? That sounds pretty easy, doesn't it? Okay. So the last one is the DIDDLES technique. With the DIDDLES technique, what I want you to think about is kind of where do you go when you don't know where to go? So if you get a text that's really challenging or you've run out of time and you're not really sure, DIDDLES is kind of like my fallback back pocket. Like, I'm not sure I want to start with DIDDLES. I'm not sure I want my whole essay to be about the DIDDLES process, but it is a good tool to have just in case. So you'll start out talking about diction, using diction to find tone and syntax to support that tone. And then you're going to look at the imagery that's there. Typically, this is going to involve figurative language, but looking at it from the lens of what is the effect of that figurative language. Next would be details. That's the analysis of the information that's presented, and sometimes the things they don't say. Sometimes it's the things that are omitted. And then language, it's going to be the overall characteristics of the words. This is going to be where you bring in the rhetorical devices or strategies. And then, of course, the syntax and the shift. I'm sorry, and I hope you didn't hear that whistle too loud. I heard it to myself. It sounds really, really loud. But That is the structure of the words in the sentences, and that's the changes that are presented in the text. So you can use these to organize your body paragraphs as well. All right, are you with me? Are you ready to move on? Okay, so we talked about the rhetorical précis as an introduction, and just to kind of make sure that you understand, it's pretty a big deal, it's pretty important. When you're building your introduction, you have to have your thesis statement, and it needs to have a solid defensible thesis, and it needs to analyze the writer's rhetorical choices, okay? So if you need a little more instruction on that, go to the replays and look at RA introductions because it's addressed there. But here is where we really get started, okay? So in this screen, kind of what you see is the new rubrics. Now, I call it the new rubrics because these are the ones that just came out. And I recommend that you take the new rubrics and print them out and keep them with you, okay? So I actually have my new rubric right here. And the purpose of this, now, this screenshot is not the one-page rubric, okay? So you can access two different types, but this one is the one that I wanted you to have because notice it has the decision rules and the scoring notes on it. And I think that is tremendously important, okay? Now, if you're like me, you're like, the rubric goes to 4, I'm gonna get a 4, right? So let's look at that 4 category. And note, this is evidence that you are going to provide specific evidence to support the claim and the line of reasoning, okay? But you also have to have commentary that consistently explains how the evidence supports that line of reasoning. So number 1, you got to have a line of reasoning, and number 2, you have to consistently support it. Now, I'm going to highlight consistently because you want to make sure that with each of your claims about the strategies, you pull this through every single time, okay? And sometimes that can be a challenge. You get writing, you're in test brain mode, you're a little bit anxious about it, and you just keep going, and then you got the timer and all of these pieces. But you've got to make sure you do all of those. But you also have to explain how multiple rhetorical choices contribute to the writer's argument or purpose or message. So it's not enough to do it just once. You've got to do it to multiple, okay? Now, I tell my students, if you're going to do like, if you don't have a lot, it is quality over quantity. So you can do 2, and then everyone has a 2, every A has a B, right? Can I hear you? MLA. So make sure that you have that evidence in there, all right? So typical responses, notice the way that it brings it down with this one. That's why I think this one is so much better than just the generic rubric, okay? So this one, it says they uniformly offer evidence to support the claim, uniformly. So they're going to do it all the way through the response. It focuses on the importance of the specific words and details to build an argument. Words and details. Check mark, because right there you just heard from AP what they want you to write about. The words and the details. Got it. Organize and support the argument as a line of reasoning composed of multiple supporting claims. So I just told you 1s and 2s and A's and B's, and check mark, you can do that too, right? And then, of course, adequate evidence. Now, relevant, sufficient, and adequate evidence is like just something that I think a lot of people struggle with. But the point is, you've got to be thorough and get it all the way across. If you can hit the what is it, the why it's used, and the how it impacts it, I think you're going to be okay with that idea of the adequate piece, okay? All right, so that last piece is that you are explaining it in terms of your interpretation of the passage. So you want to make sure that you have those pieces all in there based on the rubric. So what does a body paragraph look like? So this is kind of the frame that I want you to follow as you look. First of all, you need to have a topic sentence with a transition, okay? You've got to bring it down. Something as simple as blank begins with or blank begins by, and then talk about that strategy first, okay? So our text is about Albright. Albright begins with looking at whatever it is. So it's a very easy way to use that topic sentence transition to help pull in what you're trying to get across with your AP reader, okay? Next, specific examples to support the ideas. It has to be explicit textual evidence, okay? Pull it from the text. Go back to your notes when you annotated and pull in these little pieces, and that's going to help you as you go along, okay? You want to make sure that you thoroughly discuss all of those strategies in the beginning section and support it with text, okay? Sounds easy, doesn't it? Your discussion needs to center on how the example supports these ideas. So connect your strategy back to your main claim. Bring it back to your thesis. Bring it back to the author's purpose. And you want to make sure you do that with every body paragraph, okay? So then once you have your starting body paragraph, you're going to look at the additional paragraphs. For some of you, you might just have two. For some of you, you might go all the way and have a third one in there as well, okay? But remember, the important thing here is it's the quality of your response. It's the quality of your evidence and the explanation that links it to your line of reasoning adequately. It's that quality, not the quantity, okay? So another just kind of a frame for a topic sentence might be after whatever just happened, the author moves to whatever. Or building off the starting strategy, he or she, and then connect some way, connect your previous one to this right here to show that transition of ideas. You're not just making this up. You're not just jumping to 10 sentences later. You want to show that there's a connection from this strategy to this strategy, and you have to write that in your paragraph, okay? And then the next part's super easy. You need to just provide your explicit textual evidence, but you want to try to weave it in. And we're going to look at that here in just a second. Don't worry, I've got some paragraphs for you, okay? And then you want to discuss how the example supports that idea. Connect your strategy back to your main claim or your thesis or the purpose every single body paragraph, okay? So if you're going to have another body paragraph, you just follow this and change your topic sentence a little bit. So it should be super easy. Are you ready to look at some samples? Are you with me? Okay, here we go. All right. This is sample A. Sample A. So what I want you to do as you look at this is take a moment. We're going to look at the text, and I want you to just kind of annotate it right here. Okay? So I want you to look for the text evidence that you see and try to make sure that you can follow what the claim is about the strategy. Now, I did include paragraph 1 because that's the introduction, and sometimes I think that helps. So I want you to look at that first sentence, which is the whole paragraph, and then see how it flows into 2, okay? Note the strategies that we just talked about. Albright starts her speech on a national and personal state, comparing how they, as individuals, must choose how to lead their life to the larger America, who, as a nation, must choose how to shape history through parallel syntax, relating what she knows as Secretary of State to what her audience knows as individuals. Albright continues her description of America, all the while in parallel syntax, claiming that we could be satisfied, or we could relax, or multiple other clauses, each accompanied with a unifying we, to make her audience feel like part of the discussion, as well as a clause claiming that instead we are pursuing broader prosperity or reviewing our commitment. Albright's echoing syntax rings out in the manner of King's I Have a Dream speech, each repetition relating her claims back to her central statement of unity and opportunity, each ring drawing in her listeners. So as you think about that paragraph, look at the way you kind of put those pieces together. Okay, so I have a side question here, and I want to address it real quick before we keep going here. And the question is, should we have a counterclaim type paragraph? I think if you want to build a counterclaim paragraph in your essay, you definitely can do that. I actually advise my students to build the counterclaim in through the body paragraphs. So for example, you might start with a sentence something like, although, and then put your counter and then give your explanation there, okay? So with this one right here, it might say, although Albright does address individual responsibility throughout her paragraph, she starts her speech on a national and personal state, comparing how they as individuals. So the although addresses the counterclaim, and you can pull that through each body paragraph that you have, and that does increase your line of reasoning because you're showing, although this, here's what's really happening, here's what's really there. And that's just a little something that I have my students do. Yes, it does. It also increases, sorry, the comment was, it also increases your chance of getting that sophistication point. And that is 100% truth as well. But it's not just about the counterclaim. You can actually add concession in there too. So, hey, Brandon, you can add concession in there too. And that can help you out. While it is true that there are some options that, or some sections of the text that address her individual role of the college student, and then you can pull that in. So it's, if you bring it into the paragraph instead of having it as a separate idea, it's going to help you along the way, especially if you only get a smaller amount written versus trying to save it all for that paragraph at the end if you run out of time. Okay, next question. Do we have to cite where we get the little quotes and evidence pieces? So in the rhetorical analysis, typically you have a single text. So you don't have to go in and put like paragraph 1 or line 12 or whatever. And you don't have to put Albright in the end because you're introducing it in these sentences. So like, for example, here in paragraph 2, Albright starts her speech on a national and personal state. So we know exactly who you're talking about there. So you don't necessarily have to pull in the citations behind each of these little quotes that you can see, like they pulled from the other speech, and then must choose how to lead their life to the larger American who, as a nation, must choose how to shape history. So you've got this quotes in there. I'm also going to highlight, this is actually typed the exact way that the student turned it in. So you can kind of see like the quote within a quote isn't necessarily accurate in terms of formatting what that would look like with MLA. But it does have that citation because it's telling you, hey, this is coming from that actual speech. And that first sentence, Albright, is what's there. Now, when we get to synthesis, I'm going to give you a little bit of a different answer, but we're going to save that for synthesis day. Okay? All right. I'm curious. What do you think? Did this paragraph, what did it score? 4, 3, 2, 1, or nothing? What do you think it scored? Okay. Looks like we think it's a 3. Here you are. This response did, in fact, earn a 3. The evidence relates to the thesis. However, the response only explains how some of the evidence connects to the line of reasoning. So remember, in the rubric to get that 4, it says consistently. So you want to make sure that you're doing that. And then it goes through paragraph 2, which is the one we focused on in here. Paragraph 2, the response examines how Albright creates a comparison between her audience and the rest of America, comparing how they as individuals must choose how to lead their life to the larger America who, as a nation, must choose how to shape history. Note that in the reader feedback, we had that corrected. This is an insightful observation that is connected to the thesis and the message of the text. Once stated, the response moves quickly to discuss how parallel syntax helps to develop the comparison, but with little explanation. So again, that piece right there, if you give a little bit more of your commentary explaining how this piece of evidence supports your claim about the strategy that's used, then that's going to help bump that score up just a little bit, okay? The result is commentary that describes Albright's parallel structure within the context of another famous speech, and then it links back to King. So that's a great strategy to have there. In fact, I don't mind to share. I actually, when the prompts come out, I always go through and do it on my own just to kind of see. And I didn't go through and make that clear in my own response as well. So that was something neat, I think. That was kind of a connection there. So you can kind of see that they then make the comment on that choice to follow the verse frame form. It affects how it affects the audience. You can go through and see all of these different examples. Now, I want to really highlight something about this one. So I'm going to go back just so that you can see it again. I want you to look at the evidence that you see. Now, this one might not be a 4, but notice how there's nothing is floated. There's no floating the quote in there, which is a huge pet peeve of mine. And when I say float the quote, I mean you just took a sentence and dropped it in your paragraph and you walked away. Like, no. And another thing I want to highlight here is note the way that it is embedded. It is used together. It is woven in there. So we have that first part. It doesn't say Albright starts, comma, open quote, they must choose how to lead their life. Instead, it's actually embedded. It is a conversational piece. And that is something that's really going to help push you up. It's going to go back to that sophistication point that Brandon noted a moment ago. It is a much higher level of writing when you actually embed it, when you weave it together. So it's a conversation instead of just a repetition of what the original text said. Okay. All right. I have another one for you. Are you ready? Sample H. Let's look at paragraph 2. Holy schmackerels. Look how long that thing is. I would just challenge you, not right now, obviously, but I want you to take your pen and pencil one day, and I want you to rewrite this paragraph on a piece of paper and see how long it is. Now, just because it's longer doesn't mean it's better. Like, that's the oldest ACT strategy in the book, right? The shorter one is usually right. But let's look at the way the evidence is used in this one. All right, so Albright begins by presenting her audience with America's accomplishments and continued work in this growing world. She states the past, the Berlin Wall is now a memory, then a hypothetical, we could be satisfied with that. And then America's continued work, creating a future and building world peace. This powerful form of presenting what has been accomplished, then a hypothetical paired with reality, is a powerful way to allude to the idea that accomplishing is not enough. We must never stop trying to get better. Without the hypothetical, her statements engender awe and pride in her audience for the progress of, lost my spot there, of America wants. Albright wants her audience to understand that this continued effort is optional. We could be enjoying our technological advances while ignoring the world. Now, I'm going to interrupt this paragraph because are you noticing the level of analysis that's provided here? We're looking at a solid 2 sentences that's going to give us the analysis in those pieces. So we're able really to look at this one and figure out what that next piece is. By adding the hypothetical, she forces her audience to acknowledge that America is going above and beyond something hard to do but accomplishable. Albright does not do this once. So remember it talked about consistently? So here we're pulling in, she's bringing in these other pieces to this text as well. She does it 5 times. The Berlin Wall, nuclear weapons. Now, note there's no quotes here, but it's clear that this person read the text, understands the text, and is able to analyze the text because they're able to pull in these pieces from all of these different places and put it together. So this is your ability to look at it, put these pieces together, embed it in your argument, okay? And then also, I think it's important, notice the way that this paragraph is written in terms of the sophistication as well. So then moving down, look at the last sentence. With this series of contrasts between hypothetical and reality, the audience, a class of women, cannot help but nod their heads in understanding that this could be them, spearheading the continued struggle for gender equality in a relentless manner. Strong concluding statement that brings it back together, goes back to purpose. It doesn't repeat the same thing. You can see I kind of, when I took the picture of it, I left up in there that thesis statement that they had for us. So it's not like verbatim the same thing. It's pulling in it. We're clearly able to see that purpose. So what do you think this one earned? What's the score? Are you ready to check it out? See what it's about? All right. So this one actually earns 4 points, okay? It says it successfully integrates evidence throughout the whole thing. It supports the analysis and the commentary connects back to the thesis. Note that it uses the word consistently, okay? So with each piece, even for example, where I interrupted that paragraph and was like, hey, look at the way this pulls it in. Look at the level of the analysis that's been brought in. So you're able to see those pieces. In paragraph 2, that's the paragraph we were focusing on, the response addresses Albright's choice to evoke the past, in this case, the Berlin Wall, but then examines her use of a hypothetical to challenge that past. We could be satisfied with that. This rhetorical choice becomes the focus of the response's analysis and explicitly connects to the thesis and Albright's message that perseverance can make a difference. The response further analyzes Albright's rhetoric by suggesting that her language alludes to the idea that accomplishing is not enough. We must never stop trying to get better. Note the use that this person actually put the little brackets in there to change it. So that's another good way to kind of up your score as well. It's the little things that all add up to that sophistication point. So we want to make sure that we're pulling through and going to get that, okay? So then it goes again, the commentary within this paragraph is thoughtful and consistently supports the argument. Again, some text evidence to support it. Now, I'm going to highlight this because I think this is a valid point. I like to point this out to my students as well. So this is the feedback from our chief reader, right? Note the way the feedback from the chief reader is an analysis of the analysis. It's amazing how it works, right? Notice the way that it is embedding the evidence as well, okay? So when you get these from your teacher or you're working through them in class, you can actually look at what these are and then use that to pull in evidence from yours. So the release sample H, it did score a 4. Just kind of as a heads up, it also did get, it does get the point for the thesis statement, which you can kind of see in the picture, and it does get the sophistication point. So neat little tidbit there. All right, you got one more? Time for one more in you? I think you do. All right, so release sample I. What's the first thing you noticed here? You noticed it was a little bit short, didn't you? Now, again, shorter is not always a bad thing, but we want to make sure that we have quality of our analysis over the quantity of our paragraphs, okay? So that is a big idea I want you to kind of walk away with, knowing, hey, it does matter. All right, so this one I did go ahead and put your paragraph 1 in there, but we're going to look at paragraph 2 again because that's what we've been doing all night. Throughout the essay, the use of parallel structure creates a sense of unity and pride in the audience. For example, we could be satisfied with that. We could relax. We could turn our backs now and risk renewed war. We could stop there, Albright. What do you notice about the way the evidence is presented there? Think on it for just a second. Does that look embedded? Maybe not so much. Looking at the next part, the use of we could at the beginning of these sentences show the United States could stop what they are doing and let whatever happens happen, but instead are continuing to lead the world toward peace and equality. All right. So we talked about parallel structure. That's a struggle, right? So remember, we talked about the 1s and 2s and the A's and the B's. Let's look at this and think about how could we increase it. So in my class, when students look at this sort of thing, I'm like, all right, what do you think it made? Obviously not a 4, right? I'm going to ask you here in just a second. I got another poll for you, but I do want you to think about how could this get a 4? So when you are looking at the sample essays and you're going through all of these files later, go through and see if you can change that paragraph, increase that paragraph. All right, so what do you think? What score does sample I get? What score does sample I get? Okay, are you ready? Now, this one actually earns a 2, okay? So I want you to think about that feedback because some of us, we were kind of a little bit all over the place. Now, I feel like we need examples of good, strong writing. So I chose to not include examples of the lower levels for a reason, but I want you to go back and think about 2 points, okay? So it says that the evidence provides some specific relevant evidence. Does the paragraph give you some specific relevant evidence? We bring it back to right here. I think you can see there is some evidence there. Excuse me. And then it says, explains how some of the evidence relates to the student's argument. Does it do that? And then that next piece is no line of reasoning is established or there is a faulty line of reasoning. So we are focusing on paragraph 2, but I want to highlight back to what that rubric says, okay? In our decision rules and our scoring notes, we talked about that it consists of a mix of specific evidence and broad generality, some simplistic, inaccurate, or repetitive explanation that does not strengthen the argument. It makes one point well, but it does not make multiple supporting claims, or it does not adequately support more than one claim. How many claims are in that paragraph? Think on that. And then does not explain the connection or the progression between the student's claims, and a line of reasoning is not clearly established. Okay? So as we think about what that level 2 is, let's go back to the feedback on it. So the response earned 2 points for row B because, though it does provide relevant examples, the commentary oversimplifies and misinterprets the examples used. The response does not establish a line of reasoning. In paragraph 2, the commentary on "we could" oversimplifies its effect and loses focus, concentrating on the United States instead of on the audience. The commentary does not connect the cited example to a message about perseverance and thus fails to link the evidence back to the thesis. The commentary on allusions in paragraph 3 does not connect, we didn't look at paragraph 3, but just so that you can kind of see, it doesn't connect to the examples of women around the world to the message of perseverance, and instead this response explains the example and then makes what amounts to an oversimplified assertion about it. So you can kind of see that although there are more paragraphs, each paragraph is very simplistic in what it offers. It doesn't give much of analysis. It gives a what's there, but it's a very simplified what's there. So as I share these resources with you later, these are not secure documents. So I'm going to send you a little bit of feedback about these to kind of help you as you go forward with your paragraphs. Okay? All right. So body paragraph takeaways. First of all, topic sentences and transitions matter. Okay? Your introduction paragraph is super, super important. Make sure you have it. Make sure that you've got that clear thesis statement in there. It's defensible. It tells us what the strategies are. The writer's choices is the way that it's worded. But you've got to have topic and transitions for each of your body paragraphs. Okay? So the next one is to make your claim about the existing strategy. So whatever that strategy is that's there, you have to come up with a way to include that line of reasoning. Now, I see your question over here. The question is, I'm a little confused on the line of reasoning. What does this mean? So we actually just did a webinar with College Board on Monday night, I think it was. Yes. Days kind of run together sometimes. But in that line of reasoning came up, what exactly does that look like? So the clear line of reasoning is going to be that you have said, here's what it is, here's why it's used, here's how it impacts the text. So you've got to have your claim about that claim. So in this particular sample essay that we've been looking at, your claim about Albright's claim and the strategies that Albright uses. So you've got to make sure that you pull that through. As you are establishing your line of evidence, you have a clear claim, but you need to pull in evidence to support your claim about Albright's claim, okay? And for that, your evidence should be embedded. Don't load a quote. Don't throw a quote in there and just think that this paragraph is going to make it. Also, notice the way that in sample I, the last one we looked at, it had a big long thing. It just said, she says, big long quote, period. That doesn't get it. They want to see it embedded. But the next piece is to explain it. So if you go back and you're watching the replay of this, or you're looking at the slides later, or you're going through your worksheet and you're thinking, okay, what was Stephanie Kirk talking about? With it, one of the suggestions for your frames was try to come up with 2 solid sentences to analyze and explain the way this piece of evidence supports your claim about Albright's claim. And in those sentences, give the what is it, why is it there, why is Albright using this, and how does it work? How does it impact the audience and help contribute to the purpose? Okay? So that can be a big help. Make sure that you connect to that purpose so that you can get that extra piece. Does that answer your question? I think we definitely need to do a stream on line of reasoning kind of moving forward, because that's something that a lot of people have asked about. All right, so check yourself. In your head, did you just go before you wreck yourself? Yeah, that's my kind of teaching right there. Okay, so your topic sentences have to include transition, giving a strategy and making a claim about that strategy. Do all 3 things in your body paragraphs, okay? This is what establishes the line of reasoning. That's not what proves it, but that establishes it. So make sure that you have that transition from the previous paragraph to the current paragraph. the strategy that you're going to be analyzing, and the claim about that strategy, okay? Go back and use those paragraphs that we looked at as a model. Build your own essay using those as a frame that you can fill in the blank. Next, when you're looking at it, highlight the text evidence red and highlight your analysis green. Now, with this, I have my students do it just because it really helps out with creating like a stoplight. If there is a lot of red and not a lot of green, you know good, not gonna work. You need to make sure that the bulk of your response is your response. It's yours. So don't pull in more evidence than analysis. And I think that's going to help with that line of reasoning as well. So make sure that when you're looking at your paragraphs and you're learning this process and you're growing, go through and mark what? In the paragraph, you can say, okay, right here, I talk about what it is. Right here, I talk about why Albright uses it. Right here, I talk about how it works, how it influences and impacts the purpose. Okay, does that help? A couple of strategies to help you check yourself before you wreck yourself. Yeah, you know it. That's where I'm at. Well, guess what, guys? We have done it. We have talked about body paragraphs, and we've talked about that link to the thesis statement, embedding your text evidence effectively, and providing explanation of that evidence and how it supports the claim. So, through the use of blank, I will be able to write a body paragraph that includes a link to the thesis statement, embedded text evidence, a thorough explanation of how the evidence supports the claim. Now, remember that blank, you can put any strategy in the world that works for you, but you've got to make sure it works for you along the way. So you might try IDA, you might try TOBY, you might try DIDDLES, but whatever you try, make it your own before test day, okay? All right, so here's the last thing I have for you. I always want to get better for you because I am here to help you out. I am such a nerd about the AP Lang curriculum. I love rhetorical analysis, and I really think it's one of the most valuable skills that you can have. And I'm going to give you a real quick example. 2 things I've used rhetorical analysis to truly help me out moving in my real life. I had a situation where I went to pick up my click list, and the guy like whoosh, slammed a chicken in my car, which of course exploded it. And I used Rhetoric to be able to communicate with the store and get that situation resolved in a fantastic way. I really, I mean, we're talking like they took great care of it. So that was a great example. Another one was real world. I was taking my kids to Disney World for fall break, walking through the park, and Mr. Vacation Club comes up and starts talking to me. And we had a conversation about the rhetoric of our conversation. So I think this is brilliant. You can use rhetoric anywhere you are looking at what is the goal, why, what are you using to get that goal, why are you using that, and how's it working for you, okay? So you can use all of these strategies. I'm going to sign out for you. Get this thing running on the replays just in case we have some people coming in a little bit later. If you have any questions at all, go ahead and add them to the chat. I'll keep the window open and I will draft that email, get that email out to you with some resources along the way and anything at all you need. I'm Stephanie Kirk from Fiveable. I hope you have a great night and I hope this was very helpful. We'll see you soon.